All right, so we've organized this into different directories with the different roles of the different components, different artifacts. A couple of other things that we'd like to make this better would be that notice that we have each one of the controllers doing more than it should. Okay, notice that the role of the controller should only be to intercept the events that are being generated by the user as the user types or drags or interacts with the user interface. Okay, and then translating those events into actions that it does not implement. Right, it delegates that action to someone else. Right. Because the controller is not the owner of the data. It doesn't have the data, right? It is not its responsibility. The server has the data, right? The controller does not have the data, right? So it's not its responsibility to act on the data, right? Instead, it delegates it to somebody who knows how to interact with the data. In this particular case, we're using this fetch, right? That is going out to the server. So this functionality of going out to the server, it's such a fundamental responsibility, right, of interacting with a third-party remote data source, right, that actually it should have its own class, its own module, right? So we like to be able to break up those two tasks, those two responsibilities. Controller should handle user events, right? And when it gets data from somewhere, right, it would need to provide that data to the front end for rendering purposes, okay? But it should not be the owner or it should not be its responsibility. So let's break this up a little bit, okay? So what we'll do is that right now the only thing that we're manipulating, the only data that we're manipulating is user data, okay? We're either logging in, we're registering, creating new users. We're fetching users, right? We're finding a user by ID. It's all user information. It's all user data, okay? So we're going to collect all this data access for user data access. We're going to collect it into one dedicated module that only deals with user data access, okay? And that's its own responsibility. It doesn't know about the DOM. It doesn't know about, what are you going to do with this data? It should not care. Right, so it's a nice way to break up the responsibility. So to do that, we're going to create another directory called services. Okay, so services is going to be the place where we put all data access from the client, from the browser. All the functionality is going to live under here. Right now, the only thing that we're accessing from the server is user data. So we're going to call this user.service.client. client.js. And in here, we're going to have pretty much the mirror image of what we have on the server. On the server, we have a user service, don't we? Right? Everything is implemented under user service over here, right? Our user service, it's waiting for a post from a register. It's waiting for a get for a profile. It's waiting for a post on a login. Yes. Right, so we're going to, just like over here, we encapsulated all data requests into one single class. We want to do the mirror image on the client side as well. Right, so this will be the web service, but on the client it will be the web service client. Right, it's asking information from the server. Right, so this is the server side. We need the mirror image on the client, and so this is going to be just a function, and it'll be called the user service client. Right, notice that here we have the user service. This is the user service, but this is on the server. This is going to be on the client. So we'll follow this naming convention. User service client. All right, and what the user service client will do is that it will expose certain functionality. So, for instance, this functionality of retrieving all users, that's a perfect thing that should live in there, right? It's the functionality that actually goes and fetches data from the user for all users, a list of users, and that's all it does. That's all it does. It goes fetches data from the service. It doesn't know what you're going to do with it. It parses it out, maybe does some manipulation with it, and then just sends it back. Okay? All right. So let's expose this. This function is inside of another function. Argument, sorry. So this function here is private, meaning there's no way for anybody to access this from within this here. So what we'll do is that we're going to use this function. We're going to use this function as a constructor, right? Like if it were in a class, right? If you do new in JavaScript, if you do new and then the name of a function, it treats it as if it were a class, right? It instantiates a new instance of whatever you put in there, whatever you put in this function, right? It treats it as a constructor. So from outside the controller, we could instantiate that. We can say var user service client new user service client, right? So now I have an instance of this thing, okay? But this function here is not accessible to me, right? It's opaque. It's a local function. I don't see it, right? The only way to make it available is to map it to the instance of this class and make it available, right? So we can say this dot find. I mean, I can call it whatever we want. Get all users. I can then map it to the function, right? So now this function has a property called get all users, right? That has its value a reference to this function. Now from outside, I can do things such as instead of this, I can do things such as user service dot get all users, right? Right, and then do a then render users. Okay, all right. If we go to user admin, it doesn't work, and that's because we never loaded that JavaScript, right? Yes.
When you chain the .then and
yeah.
you're calling render users from the controller, why
yeah.
isn't it still attached to the user service client?
Where are you here? Right, because get all users, it returns this over here. So it's returning a promise. Right, so this wraps inside of a promise. So it comes in already with the then function as part of that object. So what you get back is an object that has a then function on it. All right, so basically this returns and this returns again, right? So what you get back is a promise that has the then function on that object. Yeah. Yeah, so this returns a promise, which has the JSON data in there. Okay. All right, so this was not working because the template never loaded this service. So let's do that in the where are we? In the components admin in the template. Before the controller, we need to load that. What? Here. We're going to load the script, source, and we're going to go up one, and then up again, and then down to services, and down to the user services. There we go. Okay, so now it should see that JavaScript, and hopefully, okay, this works again, right? So now we're free to remove the old content over here. We no longer need to, in the controller, do that implementation anymore. So this find all users, we can remove this from here, right? And we can remove this too, right? But is anybody else using that? I think there was one more that was using it. Right here. This find all user was using it. So we can replace this with user service client dot get all users. Right, and we shouldn't need to use this anymore. We don't need this anymore. So we have effectively moved this to the service layer, right? So we can refresh, and if we remove make this a little smaller. And if we remove this, okay, that's still working. Okay. One more thing. Notice that I deliberately called it get all users. These don't have to match. They don't have to match. Whatever you expose it as. So this is basically you defining an API, right, of whoever is calling you. I like to use the same naming convention, the same names, right, so that I keep it straight in my head, so that the controller uses the same name, it's declared here in the same name, and it even maps to the same name over here on the server. Where is it? Find all users. See that? It's a naming convention. They don't have to match, right? But it just keeps it straight in my head. This find user calls this the service on the server, and then it comes back, right? So it's a little easier to wrap your head around it. Make sense? All right. So I would expect that that all service here, for instance, this delete user, same thing. This right here should live where? Should live also on the service, right? And expose it here as a function, delete user, and we have that fetch, okay? And that fetch, notice that I'm using the then right here. I'm using the then right here. Obviously, this has nothing to do with my service. I have no idea what you're going to do with this, right? So I'm going to delete, and I'm immediately going to return. What does that return? A promise. Okay? I'm going to expose it. So delete user or delete user. Okay? So here, basically this would be user service client dot delete user, and then the then is what comes back from the service. Yes? So if we go back and refresh, let's see if that did not work. Inspect, let's see, console. User get all users is not a function. Okay, somewhere I forgot to get all users, so this is find all users, right? Anywhere else? Get all users in the init. I thought I fixed that. Oh, no. Computers. There we go. So if I delete, okay, it doesn't work. I must have broken something. Delete console, URL is not defined. All right, so the URL, I didn't move the URL. So let's move the URL. So the URL, notice that it takes an ID as an argument, right? So I need to pass as an argument the ID so that inside of the delete user, I can build the URL from the ID that I am passing as an argument. Yes? So I'll refresh. Let's see if this time, there we go, it works. All right? So I would expect that you would move everything from the controller. There would be no fetch from the controllers. It would all live on the services. Yes?
So in one place you did the user ID in square in the curly braces. And
That's on the server side, right? So on the server side, we're using Java.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But like the plus ID is the same exact.
So on the client side, I am building the URL that I'm going to call, right? And then on the server side, I am receiving it right here, right? So one is JavaScript. I'm building the URL that I'm going to use, and then I'm calling it on server. And on the Java server, I'm parsing that. Okay. All right. Excellent. I think that's all the best practices that I wanted to cover. Obviously, login, same thing. You would do the same thing, right? The profile, register. Just move everything and put it in the right place. Also notice that on the services, notice that we could have done this. We could have done this right here, like that. That's perfectly fine JavaScript, okay? But if you do that for every function, you make it harder on me to read your source code, okay? You're forcing me to read your entire source code, as opposed to if it's implemented this way, I can easily see the declarations of all your functions at the top, right? If I cared to look at the implementation, I would read further, right? But here, if you declare these at the top, I can just look at these 10 or 20 functions at the top and say, ooh, okay, I see what you're implementing right away without having to scroll through your entire source code. Make sense? Right. Same thing with the controller. All the event handlers which should be declared at the top, right, in the implementation down below. All right. I think